Thank you everyone for being here tonight. My name is Melanie Ewan. I'm one of the co-founders and lead advisors at Volition. And I personally specialize in pitch design and public speaking, both for government and for investor fundraising, and whether it's virtual or in person. I'm really excited to be here today. This is our first time launching our Ask Me Anything. We have been doing virtual pitch nights now for the last month. Hello, everybody. But this is our first time doing an Ask Me Anything, and I'm really excited to be able to launch this, especially with Paul as our first advisor and my co-founder and managing partner as well. Really excited to have him here. So these AMAs were born out of this goal that goal of helping to mitigate the impact of COVID for those in our community, as well as to create these opportunities for connection and knowledge sharing, which is really important to us at Volition. We're an international advising firm, so we have 11 advisors who each specialize in something different that it acknowledges a common pain point or knowledge gap for startups and entrepreneurs. And so what we're going to do with these AMAs is every week on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific time, we will have a different advisor on. Unfortunately, not all 11 of the advisors, or at least I don't think all of them, are going to be able to come and be a part of this, but we do have at least 5 lined up, or 6. So we're going to have 5 or 6 weeks of these AMAs, and each advisor does specialize in something different and will bring something different to the team and kind of like frame it within the context of what's going on in the world today. So how is this going to look? So in just a moment, I'm going to pass the reins to Paul, who's going to introduce himself and talk a little bit about the topic that he wanted to talk about today. And then we'll open the floor for you to ask your questions. So whether you're on Zoom or if you're watching this later on Facebook or on YouTube, please feel free to introduce yourself, ask questions, and I will monitor this and I'll flip the questions to Paul afterwards. On that note, I am going to give a very nice welcome to Paul. I'm really excited to have you here. I'm personally in Madrid. Paul's in Vancouver, as you can see from his background there, his very realistic background. So we don't always get to be in the same place at the same time anymore, very rarely actually. So this has kind of been a nice thing about the virtual environment that we get to be here together. So Paul, I'm going to pass it to you, and maybe you can introduce yourself and a little bit about your topic, and then we will jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. So I'm excited to be here. It's always funny because a lot of people think, oh, well, Paul's been doing this for so long, you know, it should be so natural and something that should come pretty easily. But it's interesting because even today I still get a little bit of butterflies before anything new like this. But it's great because I just had a coaching session with my leadership coach, and it was heartwarming to get some feedback from him and remember that we're all in this together. And that, you know, in any situation, we don't all know everything. We're all learning together. And I'm really excited to be here and have even Melanie remind me before of how much knowledge I have stocked up here from over the years that I can impart. And so, yeah, as Melanie said, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Paul Brassard. I'm an almost 20-year entrepreneur. Have been, this September actually will mark 20 official years of being an entrepreneur. And it's been a heck of a journey. And along the way, I've seen a lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of interesting situations, a lot of hard times, good times. And a lot of that has brought with it a lot of learnings. And I think that anyone who knows me would say that I think I actually love this opportunity because one of the things I love doing is teaching, as my mug here indicates from some of my lovely students. But I love teaching and I love knowledge sharing. So this is a perfect opportunity to do that. So I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. Thanks, Paul. So actually, I'd love to hear more about your journey. One of the questions that was asked pre the AMA that was sent in on Instagram was to talk a little bit about kind of your very early experiences, and you're saying you're almost 20-year entrepreneur. So what was your first kind of foray into entrepreneurship, and what does that look like over the years?
Well, it started off at the very beginning. I think if I was to look back now, I think the reality was that I always kind of had a entrepreneurial spirit. Obviously, like um, for myself, when I was a kid, I didn't really know what the meaning of entrepreneur was. Entrepreneur in my world, growing up in Prince George, BC, had a completely different meaning when I was growing up, and so I never really thought of it that way. But it just kind of always going back to that. I look back in my history and I always think, okay, actually, maybe it was always there all along. It was kind of in my blood. And it was just having a matter and a moment to start to recognize that. So my first, I'm going to call it first true foray, and I'll spare you all the childhood history. But my first true foray was essentially, I just started kind of helping out people. And I think that now if I can look back and I know myself well enough at this point, um, one of the things that I think a lot of people attest to is that I love helping people. And it is part of my true nature, and it has been since I was younger. And so I think what essentially happened was I started just helping people, and particularly had this want to help small businesses. So it started off with that, and just asking, people if I could help them with something, if there was anything I could do with them, do for them, I mean. And it was a lot around like, helping them with different tasks, different things. And it started turning into, providing assistance in getting web design done for them, assistance in getting, I mean, at the very beginning, it was like graphic design. So a lot of like business cards, brochures, customer service solutions, all that kind of stuff, with small businesses. And then it was one day a friend of mine actually said to me, well, why don't you actually turn this into a business? And at the time I had a full-time job, working in a claims center for extended warranties. And my friend said that, and I was like, maybe I could. Sure. And so he was like, well, if you do it, I'll become your first official, like actual big client. And he gave me my first big contract. And I was a great learning experience, because he actually taught me, back in the day of webmasters, taught me web mastery and search engine optimization and design and web development, and like all of the stuff having to go with that. And it was a great first opportunity. But I think the big key I took from it was helping and listening. If I was to give any kind of instant tips looking back at those days.
Amazing. Okay, so we already have some questions coming in. So, I mean, even from that, it sounds like a lot of your journey has also been kind of like jumping in and figuring out how to adapt, as well as working with people around you and creating partnerships and creating teaching opportunities and opportunities for yourself in different ways. So one of the questions about that is, what are some strategies that you have to deal with ambiguity as an entrepreneur? So when you don't know what's going on, how do you deal with these situations like the one we're in right now, and like the pending recession that we're all very aware of? How do we deal with these kinds of question mark times? And a little follow-up to nugget to plant in their question was, particularly these kind of strategies that you've used in the past, have those worked in the current situation with COVID, or have you had to adopt new tools?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot different from when I started, and only because when I started, obviously I was a rookie, and so you make rookie mistakes, and you quickly have to learn that that's okay. I now that I'm older and I've been through the reins a bit more, one of the things I allude to and tell a lot of people now is, I kind of look at it all as a great science experiment now. So, there's this constant experiment. We all have a hypothesis. We all need to test. We all need to come to conclusions. And just like in science, or our science experiments when we were kids, either the experiment works out or it doesn't. And unknowingly, when I was younger and I first started out, that was a lot of what I was doing, was just trying, experimenting, trying to figure it out. And in my case, I didn't have the luck of these amazing schools now that have entrepreneurship, or programs like League of Innovators and some of the other programs that are out there. I didn't have the advantage of that. So a lot of how I had to learn was just getting out there, knocking on doors, talking to people. And again, I can't stress enough, the question of how can I help? What can I help with? This is what I'd like to focus on. This is what I'd like to do. How can I help within that realm? So ambiguity, or not knowing. I mean, I have I think this is a story that's related to that. I mean, when I was first starting out, I had a client. Unbelievable. This is probably about 14 years ago. I had started doing like basic web design. I didn't do it myself, so I was always the person who would find other people and then help the project come together. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we were doing was Facebook marketing. And so one of our clients came to us and said, "Oh, I love what you're doing. You're already doing this for us and this for us. Can you do Twitter marketing for us as well?" And I just remember going, "Oh yeah, I can totally do that." And I had no idea how to use Twitter, how even it worked or anything like that. I had no specialization in social media by any means. And I know that it's all relatively common for us now. Social media is like all part of our lives. But if you can imagine 14, 15 years ago, it wasn't. It was still a relatively a new thing. It wasn't so ingrained into our marketing and business lives. And so I was like, yeah, totally, I could do that. And realistically, I had no idea what I was doing. And I remember logging in and creating my Twitter profile, and all of a sudden you get this large feed of information. And I was just like, oh my Lord, I don't know what to do with this. And I just closed it right away. But it was, pardon me, it was one of those things that I knew that I had to go back to. I needed to learn it. And so I just went back, and I think how this is relative to even today is, when in doubt, I think I even teach this in my class, when in doubt, KISS. And I know that sounds silly, but, keep it simple and as simple as possible. Right now, especially today, and even in those situations, I think one of the things that can happen is we get into our own heads. We maybe start digging into the over complexities, the complexity of things, and business and life. And I would say even especially right now, everything is very complicated. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of different energies. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of change for a lot of people. And so I think even if it wasn't COVID situation right now, I would still always recommend people to try to keep it as simple as possible. And so in terms of the story is that I just went back, I kept it simple. And I said, okay, let me think back to like marketing 101. What are the basics of marketing? Okay, so it's really about like keywords, and it's about connecting with an audience, not followers. It's about finding and building community. And I just started kind of looking at that, and I had a client as an example. So I just started using that and testing. And I'll finish off with saying that one of the things I realized very quickly that I now take even, and Melanie and I talk about this sometimes, about how, how we can know so much and we forget that we know so much, and how even that little bit can also be very impressive to clients, and how much of it can be real nuggets of gold. And to finish off is essentially, even though I was experimenting and trying to figure it out and I was using the basics, I was getting some results for the client, and it was a lot more than they would have got on their own. So even though I wasn't necessarily happy with it, they were happy with it, and they gave me the ability to keep doing it, and they were happy with the results because it was better than they would have got on their own. And so they kept paying me, and I was able to keep growing it and build my repertoire until such a point that I was able to bring somebody on that was more specialized in it than I was, but I was able to then quantify the work they were doing. So yeah, I think that answers the question, I hope. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question. And then I see we have another question here in the chat box, but you mentioned getting out there and knocking on doors, talking to people. Obviously, in the situation we're in, many of us are in lockdown and quarantine and isolation right now. we don't know exactly how long this is going to be for, but during this kind of time, and really any time when we're looking at kind of global relationship building, how do we kind of quote unquote knock on doors when we can't actually physically knock on doors? Like, how do we continue to relationship build in a virtual space? Do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, I think even I'm kind of going through the discovery process on that a little bit over the last little bit, more intensively, I think, over the last little bit.
Yeah.
But I think that having the luck of being in the digital space for quite a while now, and also the advantage of Volition being online and doing virtual services for at least a year, I think it is now, I think, or maybe a little bit more. I think that realistically, there has always existed for quite a while now, groups online. I know Melanie has mentioned one before, that she's got like digital nomads because she's a nomad herself. I know that there's a lot of other online communities, and I think it's a great opportunity to start looking for those online communities, and maybe even start to try to build one yourself around particular interests and topics. And I was saying to Melanie the other day, the advantage we have now compared to the last recession, as I recall it, is we have these tools like Zoom and Slack and some of these other tools that didn't really exist at the time. I was relating a story to her the other day that I remember back, what was that, 7 years ago, when I was working on an optical store opportunity with a partner. We were talking with a partner in China, and we were doing everything through Skype, and it was just so tenuous and difficult because the audio would keep cutting out, and the video was terrible, and there was not all of these tools that we had. So we really have an advantage now with these tools. And so I think, to answer the question wholly, I would say that find those online networks. We've got our own events, of course, our Volition events, our pitch nights, which are now technically global in a sense. We're about to launch our first global pitch night. There's other ones that are launching online. Seek those out, talk to people. There's online co-working now where you can meet people. There's mastermind groups, I think, are a great one. There's a lot of great opportunity to still connect with people online. And I think, honestly, actually, there's no better time than now. It's always important, but I think it's good to work on personal brand. If you're an entrepreneur, this is also a great time to put out some personal brand content. Write that up, post it, get it out on LinkedIn. Make connections still on LinkedIn. Look for those you can connect with, and build yourself a community. Because at the end of the day, you can then, one of the things that I've felt have found extremely useful is to build a really great network for myself on LinkedIn of almost 3,000 connections now. And in my case, I don't really connect with people on LinkedIn unless I've met them in some way. So it's more of an authentic network, I guess, in that sense. So I know that when I reach out and I ask for something, when I ask for help, or I'm looking for some sort of information or connection, it's there kind of at my fingertips. And I don't think that's just for me. I think that anyone can really do that. It's just a matter of actually like getting out there.
Yeah.
And connecting in those communities and finding those communities. But they do absolutely exist. There's a whole bunch of them. I'm checking out LinkedIn and I'm seeing new ones like every day with different topics. So yeah, I would highly recommend that. That's a great way to do it.
Amazing. Okay, so amping up the networking online, finding the groups, and also getting yourself visible, using this time to ensure people remember that you're here.
And don't forget to ask for help. Yeah. Where you need it, right? Because we
yes.
all, that it's part of the science experiment, right? So, I'm actually seeing in the chat that there's an upcoming question, and
Yeah,
I'll let
about
you
the
ask
science
it, Melanie.
experiment. Yes.
But I think it's a great bridge into
Yeah,
exactly that.
this
So
question.
I'll let you bridge it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was going to say exactly. I see someone asking about that hypothesis testing model, the science experiment, and sensing frustration because saying I find that most advice or startup philosophy is focused on the retail and consumer products. So how do
Hmm.
you suggest an enterprise startup implement this scientific kind of approach, particularly because there isn't a huge audience to test on compared to retail?
Yeah, I mean that's a bit tough one because I don't know everything particularly about the business. There might be some intricacies and certain variables that I'm not aware of. If it was a general situation, then I would definitely say that you know uh, again with the concept of keeping it simple. Um, I think, and I know that it can be a bit overwhelming to go, okay, well, I've got this thing and I need to get it out there. How do I start? Where do we start with? And again, I don't know the intricacies, but maybe I don't know if you have an MVP version, minimum viable product, or something that you can minimally test with, or something at least like a feature that you can go in with, or a set of features that you can go in to potential pilots. And I know fintech can be a bit tough, but I think what I've learned particularly about fintech, because I think that's what he said, right? It was large bank software, so I would assume it's within fintech. What I've discovered particularly about fintech over the past few years is you're not the only one that has that challenge, so that's a good thing in a sense. And why that's a good thing is that there's a lot of people in your position with fintech products where they're like, okay, but my product is potentially useful for a bank. That's a huge enterprise. Almost every single person I know, and I know several that are in the fintech space, and the way they've been able to get in and get pilots is through connections. So it's not necessarily going to the bank directly and saying, hey, here I am, because yeah, ultimately, if you're going to have a tough time getting that audience, you're going to have a tough time getting them to listen. They've got other things, other concerns, but almost every single person I know has been able to find connections where it has led them into a bank. And it's one of those situations of where you can keep it simple. If you identify your top 3 target customers, as it were, and chase those, go for them. Focus. I think focus is a big keyword that I would always stress, especially in today's world. But focus on those and find connections that can lead you to those, get those conversations and prove the value to them. And ultimately, at the end of the day, get one. If you can get one, guaranteed that you can get 2, and then 4, and then 8, and it goes on from there. But right now, your focus is get 1. So pick 3. Paul has kind of a rule. Paul's rule of 3. Any of my students will always attest to that. But Paul's rule of 3: pick 3. Who are the 3 you'd love to get? Find connections on LinkedIn. Find communities that you can connect with. Guaranteed, you can connect with somebody that can probably get you connection there. And it all starts with a conversation. At Volition, we have a saying, which is you never know what comes from a conversation. So you got to get those conversations. That's the work, and work towards getting 1. And once you can build the value and prove it out to 1, you can bring it to the second one. Hopefully that helps. I know it's not always that easy. And like I said, I don't know all the variables and pieces to it, but that would be my instant advice, I guess.
Amazing.
And not just for fintech, but I think for a lot of different startups.
Yeah. And Christopher, I think you can see Annika, who's from League of Innovators, says here above, great advice. Would also say that during your customer discovery, you should be sort of co-creating to not only get buy-in, but to feel like you are really honed into their problems as opposed to focused on testing your solution. This is a great way to get your early beta testers and ultimately referrals down the road too. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Paul?
Yeah, and I think that actually references I guess I could have been a bit clearer there. I think that, Annika, you're totally right. And that references my point of like building the value. That was sort of what I meant, right? So discovering what the value is for that customer, and understanding and listening to what their challenges and problems are, and then being able to answer to those. And fintech for sure, as well as a lot of other sector specific technology companies, I would always highly recommend exactly what Annika said, which is co-create. Find a way to work with them. It's not really a customer relationship. This is a partnership, especially at the beginning. So find a way to work together to create that solution. So ultimately, also, you're looking for the best customer to be somebody who's going to be willing to communicate and give you feedback, right? So that's going to be a strong point, and that would probably play into who you choose as your top three. So who has proven to be good listeners? What other banks or financial institutions also have shown that they have a history of listening, and working with other startups and integration partners and so on and so forth. So yeah, that would be what I would recommend most instantly.
We've had a question come in for you, Paul, which is, what's your opinion on crowdfunding?
Well, it's interesting. So, crowdfunding, it's funny because in the US and the UK, crowdfunding has been a normal for many, many years. In Canada, obviously, we've had our front runner, Front Funder, our friends over there being kind of at the forefront and trailblazing within Canada. And so for us, in terms of the blip of time, it's still relatively new. I think it's one of those things of, crowdfunding is great, but like most things, it depends on the company, it depends on the people, and it depends on the product or service. So what I tend to find is a lot of crowdfunding products. No, I mean, there's two sides of crowdfunding. I'm not sure if we're talking about like the Kickstarter side or if we're talking about the equity crowdfunding side. So I'll talk a bit about both. Interrelated, I have found that most things that are easy to explain, simple in concept, really understand the value proposition. Okay, so he's saying equity. So I'll concentrate a little bit more on that one. Still kind of the same thing, but I tend to find that the simpler the concept, the more that the average layman, I guess if that's a layperson, is able to understand it. For lack of a better term, the more sexy it is, or simple it is, the easier it is to understand, the more successful it's going to be. At the end of the day, though, what it ultimately comes down to is it's not just an easy answer. It's not, I know some people that have gone into it and gone, oh, I'm going to equity crowdfund and it's going to be super easy, barely an inconvenience. It's going to be, really quick. They'll find all the investors for me. It'll be simple. What you have to remember is that you still have to put the work in. Just like if it was a Kickstarter campaign, some people think, oh, I'm going to put my board game up there and it's going to be like, I'm just going to be funded tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. Not today. And not even just because of COVID. You have to do the work. You have to put the work in. You have to create marketing materials. You have to put content out there. You still need to run it like a business and get it out there and push it. I think that the benefit we have with crowdfunding in Canada is that it's a great tool to maybe possibly make the process more efficient, and allow you to manage your pool and give you access to a larger potential pool of investors. But again, I think it depends, because what I'm seeing, a lot of the successful ones that I'm seeing in Canada are things like breweries and simpler concepts that people can get their heads around and go, yeah, I can get into that. I feel that I can get into that. Whereas if it was like a super complicated fintech or super complex tech company, it may not be so easy because people might not get it so much, and it's going to be even that much more work. So if you're going to put that kind of work in, maybe it's easier just to go find your own very strategic investors. And I think that I'll finish off with saying, that's where the depends is, right? So I would say it depends because you really want to make sure in a lot of cases that you get those strategic investors and not just raise for the sake of raising. Um, and strategic investors are the ones going to open specific doors, like a fintech company. You know, if you want to get an investor, you're going to want an investor that's strategic, that's maybe going to be able to open a door to a bank that you can get a conversation with, or to certain people in securities or that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it depends. It just depends on the type of business, and if you're willing to put in the work.
Thanks, Paul. So on this kind of topic again of, well, we're on the topic, sorry, of fundraising. Something we've talked a little bit about the last few days is the insight, if you have any insights on investor mindset and habits during this time. We've had a lot of questions from people around, should I be raising right now? What are investors thinking right now? Because there's a recession coming up. What does that look like? Do you have any kind of ideas and thoughts on that from your perspective?
Absolutely, I do, and
Not
it's it's interesting because I actually remember somewhat from the last recession, and I'll be clear that you know, this question comes up every time, and recessions are bound to happen. It's secular. You know, it's going to keep coming around. They happen. The reality is investment never stops, and I don't want to get anybody's hopes like way up. The reality is though is that investment doesn't stop. Investors still have cash. It's the same situation as probably all of the rest of us are, is that we're going to be a bit more maybe diligent with our decisions, right? So the same goes for investors. Now, yeah, there's some cases where you're going to have, and there's different levels of investment. So let's be very clear about that, right? So you're going to have like early stage angels, and from my knowledge and experience, early stage angels usually are a lot more tentative in these times. So they're going to be very, very picky if they have any of their own money to invest. But they a lot of times will tend to move over towards more secure investments during recessions. So they'll go into things maybe like buy low, sell high property opportunities, or stock plays or something like that, so that when they come out the other end, they've got things they can sell off at a higher level that are like bound to go up. Yeah, there's always risk. I mean, it's the part of investment. On the other side of it, you're going to have some angels that have a stock of capital still available, and it's still going to be a matter of, like, I know a couple of angels already. I just had conversations with them, and I know that they have a stockpile of capital that they use to invest, and they don't deploy it all at once. They deploy it throughout a year, and they make diligent decisions. And I talked to them and I said, well, what's this look like for you? And they said, well, just makes my decisions all that much more diligent. And ultimately, I'm actually really interested in things right now that are going to, you know, help us through this scenario, and definitely have to come out the other end. So, you know, looking for safer investments, but it doesn't mean that they're not investing at all. Yeah, like anything, there's going to be people that are not going to invest, and they're going to back out, and that's totally fine. That's probably maybe not the investors you want anyway. And it doesn't stop the conversations from needing to happen, right? So investors don't just stop. We have to remember, investors, true actual investors, that's their job. Even angels, that it's their job. They might have other contracts on the side. One of my investors is an economist and works for the government, but that's his job. And then he's an angel investor as well. So it's like he has two jobs. He's not going to stop. He's just going to be a lot more diligent with his cash and his deployment over the next 6 or 7 or 8 months, right? Now, then you go forward, you go into like early stage VCs and VCs. I think the reality is we have to remember that, and a lot of people don't know this, like a VC, for example, raises a fund. So let's say, just a pure example, let's say a VC raised a fund for $100 million, okay? if they've raised that fund prior to all of this happening, say they closed it at the end of last year, which is the closing date for a lot of funds, if they've got that money to still deploy, it's actually in their articles that they have to deploy it by the end of that fund round, or fund cycle. Again, they're probably just going to be very diligent about the companies that they put that money into. And ultimately, what I'm hearing from contacts and from what I know from previous experience, and putting all that together, ultimately what that means is they're going to be looking for companies that are revenue positive, or are making money, or have a relatively close way of making money. So it's going to be companies that are a little bit more further along. And so they're just going to be a bit more diligent on that. So they're probably going to be a bit more risk averse on, the very risky, up and coming ones. However, as has been pointed out on LinkedIn and many other social posts before, is that in the last recession, and I'll use a couple of examples. In the last recession, some of the biggest companies we know now were founded during those times, like Uber, Airbnb, and a lot of those. And actually, there was an episode at one point, I thought it was very interesting, on Shark Tank, where they actually had revisited and looked at the statistics. And some of the most successful companies on Shark Tank that raised funds were actually developed during the last major US recession, because people basically were like, well, if I can't go to work and do what I normally do, then I've had that passion project that I've been sitting on for years, and maybe I could turn that into a business. Maybe I could do something with that. And no better time than now. So I'll get out there and actually go do it. And I think, going back to my previous point before, is having these great programs like League of Innovators, Bridge for Billions in Europe, and a lot of these other ones. I know those are for youth. There's also for other ones as well, like the VAP program and all that kind of stuff. That realistically, there's also so much programming available now out there that, and there's also government funding. There's also government funding for learning, and there's a lot of opportunity to get out there and go learn new skills and launch new things and try new things. Try the science experiment, test. And just because you test doesn't mean you have to start a business. Just start talking to people, start testing, see how it goes, see what the response is, and utilize these programs that are out there, and online learning platforms, and all this access we have to information. And it's an opportunity to build great things. So I know it's not all rainbows and butterflies out there, but there is silver linings if we look for them. There is opportunity, but like anything, we have to take the steps and we have to work for it. But there is, I'm seeing some incredible innovation and stuff that's coming out of this. Like last night, I was so amazed by a restaurant called Earl's and Joey's. Earl's restaurant just started Earl's grocery website, where it's amazing. And I didn't tell you about this, Melanie. I just found it last night, and I was so excited by it because I'm like, that's so smart. They have instant access to groceries, and basically they're saying, buy your meal from us, take it out, get it delivered. And also, here's Earl's grocery. And if you need any basic staples, you can order them from us and get them delivered at the same time. Because the restaurants, it's so smart, because the restaurants are already getting that supply and they need to stay in business. What a great way to do it. And things like our friends over at Isle, formerly known as Luna Pads, they were making pads for women before, and likely still will, but they've instantly switched and are now making masks for health workers. Like, there's some incredible innovation out there. You just got to watch for it and listen and be part of communities and ask questions. I know it sounds a lot simpler than it really is, but I think that's how you start. And take advantage of all the information and stuff that's out there.
But it sounds like almost in some ways you're saying it is simpler than we're sometimes making it out to be like, it seems like this big, hairy, scary thing, but you're kind of saying it's still about relationship building.
Oh, no
It
doubt.
still comes
Yeah,
back to those kind
absolutely.
of like traditional ways of doing business, which I know you've actually said to me that it comes back to the traditional ways of doing business, but it's not like having to reinvent the wheel. It's just doing things in slightly different ways or being more creative and more intentional, which I
Yeah.
wanted to touch on a solution that at Volition, one of our solutions that we have put into place, that was Paul's kind of little brainchild, because we did some COVID response planning, and now we're getting into kind of the recovery planning and what that's going to look like. And one of the things that came up, I can't remember, I guess at last week's pitch night, when I was talking about how Paul used to be in a band. And so he came up with this, one of our solutions is, he's aptly named Getting the Band Together. So I know he can jam out on this topic for a while. And I just wanted to touch on that and say, like, as an actual solution, people can put it in place, other small businesses can put into place, like what we're doing. What can you kind of expand on what getting the band together means in your mind, and how to do that?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it simple because I know you're probably like, time, Paul, time. But the I hear you screaming in my head. But you know, my mind for problem solving, and in my case, it works thematically. So a lot of times I'll frame challenges with trying to find a solution as a theme. So in my case right now, the theme that I'm going with, as Melanie said, was getting the band together. So I'm looking for instances where I can get band members into a perceived band and form a community. Because in our case, our community is really supporters who support entrepreneurs. Because at the end of the day, the more we can support the community, the better it is for all of us. And so, you know, having great conversations. I had a call yesterday with Platform Calgary. We've been doing a lot of work with Spring, our friends over at Spring, and huge shout out to Keith Ipple and the gang over there. League of Innovators, Bridge for Billions, You Construct, like
Startup Canada.
there's this Startup Canada. Oh yeah, thank you. Yes, Kayla over and the friends over there. So like, you know, there's this great opportunity to band together in my mind for us to work together, collaborate, and find ways to support not only each other, but also the community, and be there to help. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's about asking questions. It's about asking for help. It's about not being afraid to ask for help. And I know sometimes that can be harder than it saying it. But you know, we are all here to help, and we're part of this community because we want to help. So, you know, I think that's another opportunity of, you know, take advantage of that, so to speak. Not advantage in a negative way, but like, we're here to help. So be aware of that, and that's okay. And I think I really want to say, like, that's the relationships part. I will always say a 100%, 120%. Relationships is honestly probably 100% of your business, 80% of your business at least, because at the end of the day, that's how things happen. You build relationships, and I would say even right now, what I'm finding with a lot of my network and community, my network at least, is a lot of them are looking for relationships and connection. You know, many of us are self-isolated, maybe in quarantine. So people are looking for opportunities to connect and build relationships. So, you know, there's an opportunity there to put it out there and say, hey, I'm looking to build relationships. I'm looking to build connections. I think people are going to be very open to that. And as long as you're authentic about it, I guess, and true, and not you know, not trying to take, on the negative side, take advantage, pardon me, of people and situations, which unfortunately we are seeing a little bit of out there. But yeah, I mean, it's good. I mean, there's opportunities. There's always opportunities to build connections and relationships. And even if it wasn't COVID situation right now, I would still say the same thing. Always be building relationships. Always be building that connections and network, because at the end of the day, that's the true power of any business. Because then when you do need help, it's there to help you.
Yeah. Amazing. We also had a really great question from someone in here saying that we've talked a lot about entrepreneurship. This person is wondering, have you seen in your career any great achievements or stories in intrapreneurship? And I know I'm cognizant of our time, but if you want to spend a couple of minutes talking about intrapreneurship, I know you work with a global startup school that works a lot on that topic, and I'm curious if you have any kind of insights from there.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I don't have as many examples of entrepreneurship, but I do have one that I know pretty well from a previous client of ours. And basically what they did originally in starting his entrepreneurship career, he actually was out of Australia. And he actually worked for a financial institution, and he recognized that their communications with their customers was terrible. So essentially what was happening was that people were getting their new credit cards, and in order to activate your credit card, you had to call in and you had to go through this lengthy process. So then, he basically just asked himself, like, well, couldn't there be a better way? Isn't there a better way to do this? And when he posed the question to the executive team, they said, oh, well, probably text messaging. And he said, well, but hold on, we haven't talked to our customers. We don't actually know that for sure. Maybe we should survey them. Maybe we should ask them what they would prefer and be customer centric rather than product centric. And they said, okay, fine. Why don't you lead the way? You build the survey, you contact the customers and find out what they want, and then let us know what the results are. So he said, okay, great, awesome. So now I'm part of this project team. I'm going to put this together. And so he did that and found out actually that people preferred to do it by a different method. So then he came back with the results, and they said, oh, okay, great. Now that you've done that, why don't you lead the team to actually implement that new solution? Now, that wasn't necessarily during time of recession, but my point is that entrepreneurship can be difficult in the sense that it depends on the company, because some companies maybe aren't so willing to listen. And in his case, he was luckily with a financial institution that was open to innovation and change and improving experience for customers and for people. So it was good for him. And if you are in that situation, I think that, again, it's a matter of looking for opportunities to help them improve. I think at the end of the day, what I've always found, and this is for entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship, it's about finding an opportunity to provide value and building for entrepreneurship and for the company. You're really going to have to quantify and qualify, how that's going to improve that business and their business and the way they're doing things, right? So, because otherwise it's going to be hard for them to justify maybe the budget or why they should do it. So I think it's more about the preparation, and I would say you should always be prepared. But with entrepreneurship, the luck would be that a lot of people want to help entrepreneurs and are willing to listen at least and have a conversation. Whereas entrepreneurship can be a bit more difficult because the company has to justify the time, the money, all that stuff. So it's a lot more preparation and coming prepared with the solution. What does that look like? What is the end value? How does that? No, you should have that as an entrepreneur as well. But at least with an entrepreneur, you can usually get the conversations a bit earlier. So it's just about that extra level of attention and preparation. And I think I answered the whole question.
Examples of achievements in entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Most important thing about thinking. Yeah. So I think it's about the preparation and building, a full, I guess, report of what that all is going to look like at the end of the day. I'm not big on business plans. I think that maybe is an opportunity where you do sort of have to build kind of a business plan in a sense and have enough documented evidence of what that's going to look like at the end of the day for them.
Amazing. Okay, so it sounds like we've had like 55 minutes of gold, and on this topic of resiliency, which I know you really like to talk about, and we talk about a lot off camera and in our own time as well. So the kind of key themes I got out of this were around keeping it simple, so your KISS principle, around finding connections, networking, that this is still a great time to do that and get out there and build your brand, build your team around you, get those partnerships going, lean on people, ask for help. Everyone always has something they need help with. So no matter what, kind of put aside the ego and ask for that help and get yourself out there, be visible, and take advantage of the unique opportunities of environment that we're in right now. Although obviously we're all very aware of the difficult situation that we're in and we don't know what's to come. There's also opportunities here, particularly in that we have all these digital tools and people are being really, really fantastic right now. So before we wrap up, I would love to know, Paul, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, you can connect with me. As I mentioned before, I love LinkedIn. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn for sure, Paul Brassard. And by all means, I mean, you can find me on our website, volitionadvisors.com. You can book with me for a virtual coffee and convo. You can book me for a session if you want to do a deeper dive. And then in addition, you can email me at paul@volitionadvisors.com. Melanie just posted my link in the chat for those of you who are still here. But happy to connect and have conversations and listen and help however I can. So please don't be afraid to reach out.
Thank you so much. Did you have any last things you wanted to say?
I think I'll just tie into what you said before, which was just reminded me something that we say all the time at Volition. As an entrepreneur, always have an ask. So I think our ask is please do connect with us. Check out our pitch nights and events. If you're looking for community, we have an amazing community. So check out our upcoming pitch nights and hope to connect with you sometime in the future. Yeah,
for sure. Yes, everyone, thank you so much for coming. We're going to have another Ask Me Anything next Tuesday with Sandra Spencer talking about should I raise kind of questions that you might have. She's over in Calgary, and Edmonton, I should say, has a really interesting, great perspective as well. A longtime friend of Volition and Volition advisor. So she's fantastic. Come in at the same time next week for that. And hopefully we'll have Facebook Live up and running that time. Otherwise, this week, we also have virtual co-working every single Friday from 9 to 11 a.m. Pacific time that you can join us for as well and just get some stuff done. Make sure, I know it's hard to focus right now, so get in there, focus with us for 2 hours while having little bits of networking in between those focus times. As Paul mentioned already, we have lots of virtual pitch events, yes, coming up. So head over to volitionadvisors.com/events and you can see more about that. But thank you all for joining us so much. We really appreciate it. And we hope to see you back here soon. And thank you again, Paul, for coming out and taking part in our first ever AMA. Little technical glitches, but we'll get it. We'll get it.
Science experiment.
Yeah, science experiment. Yeah, just get out there. You know, doesn't have to be perfect. Thank you so much, Gabriella. And thank you to everyone who's in the chat here. So I'm going to close the event. All right. Bye, everyone.